Good evening. This is the March 25th meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, chair of the CAC. Our vice chair is Naj Daniels. I'd like to thank our clerk, Amy Sayung, and our operator, Daniela Rible, for this meeting. And thank you also to SFCTA staff. There is a cake at the front of the room. For anyone in the hearing room, please help yourself. Madam Clerk, please do a roll call to ensure we have quorum and then read an announcement about public comment.
CAC members, when I call your name, please say present to ensure a quorum. Member Bars?
Bars present.
Bars present. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels absent. Member Ford? Ford absent. Member Imadadeen? Imadadeen absent. Member Kim?
Kim present.
Kim present. Member Levine? Levine absent. Member Margarita?
Margarita present.
Margarita present. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales present.
Milford Rosales present. Member Ortega?
Ortega present.
Ortega present. Chair Siegel?
Siegel present.
Siegel present. Chair, we have quorum. Also, public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll move on to item 2, Chair's Report. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight's CAC meeting. I'd like to start off by reporting that Member Margarita and I were reappointed to the CAC for another 2 years by the board at yesterday's board meeting. I'd also like to thank Amy Sayung for sending the CAC the Executive Director's Report. I have just a few announcements before we jump into tonight's agenda. CAC members may recall that we recommended approval of an appropriation last month for Transportation Authority staff to engage in autonomous vehicle or AV policy development, which is underway at the federal level. Since then, staff have continued federal engagement centered on the Self-Drive Act and related legislation, including the AV Safety Data Act. Staff participated in a National Highway Transportation Safety Administration hosted AV Safety Forum with federal officials, industry, and other stakeholders to discuss key safety challenges using San Francisco's experience to provide real examples. Staff also met with congressional offices, Speaker Pelosi, Senator Padilla, and Senator Schiff to provide briefings and advocate for strong federal safety standards while preserving state and local regulatory authority, particularly regarding AV interactions with emergency responders. Staff will continue to provide updates. On March 10th, Mayor Lurie and Chair Melgar convened the Street Safety Initiative Working Group, a collaborative forum of city agencies established through the mayor's executive directive to implement the directive in response to the San Francisco Street Safety Act resolution, authored by Chair Melgar and unanimously adopted by the Board of Supervisors in September. This resolution recommits San Francisco to eliminating severe and fatal traffic crashes, strengthening interagency coordination, and scaling proven safety solutions. As a requirement per the Street Safety Act, the Transportation Authority will coordinate with the Controller's Office City Performance Unit to assess effectiveness and completion of core agency responsibilities and host an annual hearing on the review of street safety progress, challenges, and data anticipated in fall 2026. Meeting management notes. CAC members, staff, and public commenters in the room, please be sure to speak directly into the microphone so folks attending virtually can hear you. And please try to limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. Please turn off and silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Not seeing any. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Not seeing anyone. Operator, is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
Yes, there is one comment. Roland, go ahead. You have your 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Now.
I'm sorry, just a moment, please.
Oh, okay. Just a second, Roland. We need to start the clock.
Okay, you may
Okay.
start.
Thank you.
Thank you. So hopefully my comment is going to be shorter than the time it took to start the clock. It's for the benefit of the people who are not on Amy's distribution list, is that if you want access to the executive director's report, it was always linked to from the other item on the agenda, and you just click on it, you will see it, and that normally is added to the agenda, you know, probably a few hours before the meeting actually starts. It's definitely there in the morning normally. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. There is no more remote public comment for this item.
Great, thank you so much. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Items 3 and 4 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present, but is available to answer questions. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Member Milford Rosales.
Thank you very much. This could just be an email later. That's easier, but I'm curious on AB 1837. The update included mentioned that there was an amendment to eliminate the provision that would allow for the use of cameras to enforce parking violations in bike lanes for double parking. Is there, I guess, do we know who did that so I can send them an angry email? Because I hate swerving out into the traffic on a bike lane and risking getting hit by a car every time someone just wants to make a quick drop off.
Hi, thank you, Amber Krebs, Senior Public Policy Manager. I can definitely get you that information after the meeting as far as who you can address, but we were, our understanding was that there wasn't any likelihood of it moving forward without those provisions eliminated.
Dang it. Well, thank you anyway.
Member Kim.
Thank you, Chair. I have a quick question about AB 1838. Oh, no, sorry, the first one, AB 1421. I heard from the newspaper, but I don't know the detail. Is anybody explain how to measure what is the general idea for road usage charge?
Yes, thank you. So a road usage charge, the state's been looking at it for more than a decade, I think. And the idea is as the fuel fleet gets more fuel efficient, the gas tax revenues continue to decrease because it's a per gallon. And so over time, the effectiveness of the gas tax goes down. So the state is looking at, you know, what kind of revenue measure could they identify as a replacement to the gas tax? And so thinking about, it was always meant to be kind of a proxy for, you know, you're paying for how much you're driving. And so they're looking at the option of a per mile charge, looking at ways it could be collected, how it could be structured, and this would just continue that work.
So this will be additional tax. like gasoline tax will stay, but this one will be additional one
I
for
think
all the vehicles or any specific vehicles, like some gasoline, probably hybrid vehicle they use both, so a little complicated. So probably any vehicle will be subject to this one. So there will be two tax, gasoline tax still exist, and this is additional one.
they haven't gotten to the point of having an actual proposal yet. Previously, when they've discussed it, it's been as a replacement, but they could make exceptions for types of vehicles. They could decide that it should be higher than the gas tax. They could keep both. I think they're still developing a proposal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions or comments from members on the consent agenda? If not, is there any public comment in the room on the consent agenda? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on the consent agenda?
There's no remote public comment. I'd just like to give a friendly reminder to please speak directly into the mic so that we can remotely hear all the comments. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 3, the minutes from the February 25th meeting, moved by Member Bars and seconded by Member Milford-Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve the minutes, item 3 on the consent agenda, Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels absent. Member Ford? Ford absent. Member Imadadine? Imadadine absent. Member Kim?
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine? Levine absent. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford-Rosales?
Milford-Rosales, aye.
Milford-Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 6 ayes. The minutes are approved.
Great. We'll move on to item 5, adopt a motion of support to allocate $9.8 million in Prop L funds with conditions for 3 requests. And we have Senior Program Analyst Amelia Wally here to present this item.
Good evening, CAC members. This presentation includes the allocation of $9.8 million in Prop L funds for 3 requests. So we will get right into them. If I can advance my slideshow. Okay. So the first request tonight is for $4 million in sales tax funds for construction of SFMTA's Powell Street Improvement Project. This project is included in Mayor Lurie's Heart of the City Executive Directive to revitalize downtown San Francisco and accelerate the city's economic comeback. Project elements include sidewalk widening, sidewalk replacement, new curb ramps, installation of street furniture and planters, enhanced lighting, and updated loading and cable car service stops. The project is using a construction management general contracting, or CMGC, method, with the pre-construction phase awarded back in February 2026. The intention of the CMGC contract is to integrate a construction expert in the design process to work out any issues with constructability during the design phase. During the pre-construction phase, the project team will determine any impacts to cable car service, transit rerouting, and service support during construction, and will share the transit service changes with the public prior to the start of construction. Some special conditions on this item. So this request includes an amendment to the Safer and Complete Streets 5-year prioritization program to add the subject project with $4 million of an $18.2 million placeholder that's programmed to the Housing Incentive Pool, or HIP, program placeholder. The purpose of Metropolitan Transportation Commission's HIP program is to reward jurisdictions for building or preserving affordable housing with incentive funds. San Francisco did very well, receiving about half of that $71 million incentive pot. So this is a request for 4 of the $18 million in San Francisco HIP funds that were subject to an exchange with Prop L. This exchange was done so that San Francisco projects can access the funds sooner and with more flexibility since they are local and not federal funds. MTC staff have okayed the proposed allocation, and we anticipate some and possibly all of the remainder of the $18 million will be needed for the Howard Streetscape project. We also recommend a waiver to Prop L policy to allocate funds for the construction phase prior to completion of the design phase in order to accommodate the accelerated project delivery schedule to meet Mayor Leary's goal per the Executive Directive 25-4 for the project to break ground by fall of 2026. And we also recommend placing the funds on reserve to be released by SFCTA staff when SFMTA staff provide evidence of completion of design for each of the bid packages for the CMGC. The next request is from Caltrain for $1.3 million to design ADA access improvements at Caltrain's 22nd Street station. This station is the railroad's only regular service station that is not currently wheelchair accessible. So while the system as a whole provides meaningful access to passengers with disabilities, the platforms at 22nd Street station are located below street level and are only accessible by stairs. Prop L funds would be used for final design of the recommended concept that came out of the Prop K funded Caltrain 22nd Street Station ADA Access Improvement Feasibility Study, which included one ramp on the northbound platform side and one ramp on the southbound platform. In addition, the project will include other ADA-related improvements as noted on the slide. Design is expected to be completed this summer 2027 with an open for use date estimated in June 2029, but subject to securing construction funding. And we are supporting Caltrain's efforts to secure FTA ASAP grant funds that fund these types of ADA improvements for legacy transit stops to leverage some Prop L and Caltrain funds. And then the last request for tonight is from the Port of San Francisco for $4.5 million to construct a new single float two-berth ferry landing to provide regional ferry service to the Mission Bay area and surrounding neighborhoods. Adjacent to 16th Street, the Mission Bay ferry landing is anticipated to serve more than 350,000 annual weekday passengers, plus 125,000 people traveling for special events. Over the past several years, the Port has completed earlier phases of construction work, including partial removal of former Pier 64 and underwater prep work. The remaining work, which these funds will support, includes the installation of piles, floats, gangways, fixed piers, canopies, utilities, and landside improvements. Construction will commence in June, with completion expected by June of next year, except for the ferry landing float with vessel charging infrastructure, which is to be provided by San Francisco Bay Ferry and is anticipated to be complete by September of 2027. Special event service and regular weekday commuter service will begin sometime after completion, dependent on San Francisco Bay Ferry's operations plan. And Prop L funds for this project as a whole are leveraging over $72 million, including funds from UCSF and other federal, state, regional, and local funds. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions. We also have project staff from SFMTA, Caltrain, and the Port available.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Ortega.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Forgive me if this question sounds a little silly, but I noticed later we had some stuff regarding CACs and Portal, and I'm trying to re-understand how the 22nd Street Caltrain station fits in with the Portal project. And like, for some reason, and this could be incorrect, I thought that we were undergrounding the train line like before it got to 22nd Street, and maybe that's wrong, and that might be why I'm confused. But I would like to just have a re-overview of like where the undergrounding of the Portal project is going to start, and like whether or not these improvements are going to be temporary if we are actually undergrounding it where I thought, which clearly may be wrong.
Hi, everyone. Jesse Kaler, Rail Program Manager. Member Ortega, thanks for the question. It helps tee up actually another item on your agenda that pertains to the Pennsylvania Avenue Extension Project. As it pertains to 22nd Street Station, just a couple things to clarify under this item. First is that the Portal project will have no bearing on 22nd Street because the limits of that project essentially start at the Fourth and King Station connecting into Salesforce. The Pennsylvania Avenue extension, which is the subject of another item on your agenda, is a future, very long-term project that may be a couple of decades until it is into construction. Given the importance of this station to San Francisco and, in fact, the Caltrain system as a whole, and the relative modest expenditure necessary to bring it up to a level of appropriate accessibility, we're recommending moving forward with this set of access improvements.
Okay. So I think that's probably why I've been getting confused. I think I've heard Portal colloquially referred to as getting high-speed rail to San Francisco when it's not. It's one of those funny term things, so thank you for indulging that question. And so basically, the idea is that the Pennsylvania project, which we'll hear about later, which is, I think, what made me think of this, that's a much more long-term goal, and so that these ADA improvements will be in place for at least 10 to 20 years? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Member Bars?
I think Member Kim gets it before me, Chair.
Okay, sorry, didn't see which one went up first. Member Kim?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Member Bars. I have a question on Powell Street improvement. It says widening sidewalk from 15 feet to 20 feet, and my understanding is both sides is explain what is the current condition, and then after widening sidewalk, I'm not familiar with this area, but do we close road, or do we remove the parking space? And what's the current condition, and then after widening sidewalk? I see the design, and then only cable car and then sidewalk. That means explain the current condition.
Hi, my name is Maya Small. I'm the planning director over at MTA, and also I believe we have Victoria Chong online as well as Michelle Wu, who is also the project manager. So I just want to make sure Michelle has an opportunity to jump in if she wants. But I can speak a little bit to the nature of the widening of the sidewalk in general, which is to say we're certainly not closing the streetway at all, and the cable car is the star of Powell Street, especially these 3 blocks. And so this is really about kind of accommodating more uses on the sidewalk, especially. So this will provide, in some cases, it's a very, very kind of curated way in which parts of the sidewalk will be widened a little bit to advance some of that kind of extra public realm and extra space. But it is being very carefully tailored around where there are some existing utilities, and the corners are going to be staying very much where they are. A lot of the kind of curb at the corners, because we've been doing some curb ramp improvements there already under an earlier phase. But I do want to allow my colleagues online to speak.
Thank you for the answer. So is this the currently only roadway for cable car, or?
The roadway right now, 2 of the blocks, so the first block right now, it doesn't have any other traffic other than the cable car on it, right? That's between Market and Ellis, and then from Ellis to O'Farrell, there is a sort of red lane section of it, but there are some ways in which commercial loading can come through, and passenger loading will be still available, I believe, in one spot, although almost everything is being moved to the O'Farrell. So it will look very similar in some ways to the way the usage is now, with some minor adjustments as to where some of the loading may shift around a little bit. But it's primarily for cable car and commercial vehicles to be able to move through.
Yeah, it looks like our Market to Ellis already, only cable car, but from Ellis to Erie, those 2 blocks looks like there's car lane, and then, as you mentioned, the loading zone. So those will be removed, right?
So it's going to be commercial vehicles and the cable car, or basically transit lanes. So you could have paratransit, you could have taxi, you could have transit, and you can also have commercial vehicles.
So even after widening sidewalks, still those commercial and transit
it's just
Big-
center lane.
yeah.
So they're just two lanes, one lane in either
Oh.
direction, as basically as it is now. And that's mostly to access the
Okay.
loading.
So, yeah, loading zones
Mhm.
accessible.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. And then those vehicles also will use same space in the cable car goes.
Yeah, there's only one lane in either direction.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
Member Bars?
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. First on the Caltrain ADA item, and then my second question is on the ferry landing. So on the thank you. On the Caltrain item, I just want to make sure that I understand the scope of this project. So this project, it has been going on since 2022, and it has looked at a series of improvements to meet the Americans with Accessibilities Act, and this station, 22nd Street Station, is hard because it's under the subgrade. I'm using terrible language here, but it's lower than the streets. I saw the diagram. I've also used it many times and done it with a stroller, so I get this. This is good. Here's my question. It looks like the total cost for this project is like $16 million, and the things we're getting are some ramps and tactical, like bumpy stuff, technical term I know, and some lighting and signage. Am I right about that?
Good questions, Member Bars. The thing that really drives cost at this location, if you can picture that very unusual configuration of station, is on the west side of the platform area. So if you're sort of accessing the station facing south, it would be on your right. There is an embankment, and then there is housing above it. And so in order to put a system of ramps on that side, and of course it's very important to do the improvements on both sides for a traveler who's coming to and from the station, requires some pretty tricky and delicate work to stabilize that embankment to protect the structures that are there in order to construct that ramp. In addition, just this site under the freeway with the tight conditions and the active electrified railroad means that there is a degree of just complexity that is reflected at this level of design in the contingency side to that estimate. So while I also had a similar first reaction, as I understood more about the design, we would not want to come to you and say we think we can do it for $5 million when we have a sense that the more appropriate cost estimate is more in this range. And so one of the things that will come out of this final design process is tightening up that estimate. And in parallel, it's why it's really important that we're seeking grant funding for this, including from the federal program that's designed around these types of improvements.
Okay, thank you for that answer. That was very helpful. Were any other options considered for ADA access other than this very expensive ramp?
We actually funded with Prop K funds a study that looked at a whole bunch of alternatives and conducted engagement. It was led by Caltrain. We participated as a partner agency, and this design reflects the recommended alternative that came out of that study. There were various configurations of ramps and some early look at, elevators are the other option. Those are quite costly and have a big maintenance burden. And so ultimately, Caltrain, with the input of the community and the D10 office, identified this configuration for the ramps.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Does feel very expensive, but we do need to make them compliant for people with disabilities. So, okay, thank you. That was helpful. On the ferry landing question, I just wanted to make sure that I understood that one as well. So this project has been going on since 2020 to build out this ferry landing, and this particular piece of the work is to address new piles or gangways that hadn't initially been scoped. Do I have that correct or no?
I'm going to let Simon Betzalel from the port, who's the project manager, respond.
Thanks. Hi, good evening. My name is Simon Betzalel. I'm a project manager at the Port of San Francisco. The project actually began in 2018. It's been coming for a long time. There were some questions. Originally, the port tried to advertise this as a CMGC project, and it was a failed bid. Then the project was split into phases. Phase one was completed in 2020, which was the initial remediation and removal of a portion of former Pier 68. Then, unfortunately, there were some funding questions. The legality of Prop L to be used on the project came under question for a few years, and then costs escalated during COVID. So the project had to be kind of put on the shelf for a minute. Then the port, in partnership with SF Bay Ferry, applied for a Clean Ports grant through the EPA and was awarded additional funding for ferry electrification. That closed the funding gap, as well as Prop L was allowed to be used on the project again. So Phase 2A was completed just this past November. That was finishing the site remediation and removing the remainder of the former Pier 64. So this final phase is Phase 2B, and that's going to begin this summer. And that's actually finally the physical construction of the ferry landing. So that's putting piles into the water. That's the gangway. That's the ferry infrastructure that actually looks like a ferry landing instead of the work that's mostly been underwater up until this point, as well as some upland improvements to the ferry plaza and Agua Vista Park.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that explanation. So up until today, like it's been a lot about prepping the site or remediation. Now this is actually funding for the construction of the necessary pier and gangway.
Yes,
do I have
correct.
that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. And in the memo, there was, and also in the presentation, there was a projection, which I love. I love projections of users, so thank you for including this. But estimated to annually serve over 350,000 weekday passengers and 125,000 passengers for special events. Could you just explain where those numbers come from? What are the assumptions in those numbers?
I think that would be better left to San Francisco Bay Ferry. This is part of their, I believe, 2050 expansion plan. So this landing was viewed as a number of other landing expansions as a part of their ferry network. They put together the ridership numbers, I think, in coordination with the port, looking at projected growth of Mission Bay, with Mission Rock coming online, Pier 70, these other neighborhood developments. So unfortunately, that number predates my involvement by a bit. I'm the third person to sit in this chair managing the project for Mission Bay Ferry Landing. We can follow up with those numbers or the source of those numbers, but I believe they're from long-range plans.
Great. Yeah, I would love it if we could get the source from the SF Bay Ferry. But thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Member Milford Rosales.
I would like to be included with number bars. I'm following up on those numbers. I live in the neighborhood and found those numbers pretty laughable. Chase Center has a capacity of under 20,000. Like Portola Music Festival down at Pier 80 never clears 30,000. Like it being special event 125,000 with no timeline seems kind of insane to me.
But wouldn't it be exciting if it were true? I mean, come on, I get it, but like, come on, right?
Like, and then even with weekly ridership numbers, those seem pretty high as well, given where people are commuting from to get to UCSF, which is the major employer of the area. So I'd be very curious in seeing where those numbers came from.
Understood. We'll follow up.
Can I just a couple points of clarification, Simon? The legality issue was with RM3, correct?
Oh, excuse me. Yes, thank you.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. And then also that these numbers are the annual estimate. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe we should be asking for them to be higher, right?
Yeah, if those are annual numbers.
We want to see the math. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I also see the math? Thank you.
I have a quick question about the Powell Street improvement project. I noticed the very nice new railing in the rendering at the cable car turnaround for the folks queuing, and I was wondering if there had been any consideration to including a fare box or some fixed way to pay for fares while queuing as part of this project, because I have heard from the cable car operators that the handheld devices are not terribly reliable, and there's been a lot of discussion recently of the high cost of the cable car system, and I was wondering if this could be an opportunity to improve fare box recovery as part of this project.
I was going to actually just check in with Victoria Chong, because I think she's been perhaps talking more with the cable car folks if there's been specific conversation around fare changes. I know that that's come up as an issue, and certainly engaging the cable car at the turnaround and exactly what that kind of user experience is. I know there have also been a number of challenges because it's so historic, right, that there are a lot of things that we can't mount to it. But there's been a lot of detailed conversation about exactly what kinds of utilities and fixtures and things are happening kind of within that zone. So Victoria, is there anything that has come up kind of in this process that you think is helpful here?
Yeah, we haven't heard specifically from like our operators or internal folks of that interest of having a fare box there specifically. But noted that, you know, the Clipper card handheld devices can be challenging, but of course there's also the Muni mobile app, and folks can go to the kiosk if needed. And then there's also the alternative of cash when the kiosk is not open. So there are a few ways that folks can pay for the fare to get onto the cable car. And I imagine that there might be just like potential operational issues or like opportunities for like maintenance of the boxes if they were put or installed there. So I think with the current options of fare that are available at this time, at least, that wasn't particularly explored.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Member Ortega?
Yeah, I do want to just make a comment though. Like, I understand that cash is an option, but like more and more people just don't carry cash. So like the uptime and the reliability of electronic payment options needs to be a serious consideration as we move forward for all options, because like my dad carries cash. I don't. My fiance doesn't. Most people I know don't carry cash. And like if cash is the only option because we can't take electronic payment, that's a huge problem. So just something to consider.
Member Margarita? Sorry, did you want to respond to that?
Never mind. I just wanted to note that there are electronic options for folks to get onto the cable car aside from the Clipper, although it may be a little bit wonky, but there's the Muni mobile app still, and folks are able to book those tickets in advance too. But noted on the comments that were shared today.
Member Margarita?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to humbly, respectfully ask, with regards to the numbers, et cetera, report of San Francisco Mission Bay, ferry landing, if we can all receive that report. And then just to add to that, I'm actually a witness to, my friends who grew up in the city, they were pushed out because of cost of housing in San Francisco. And so they do live in Sacramento and Fairfield and Sassoon, et cetera, Richmond, Oakland, and all of that. And they have ridden the ferry to come to San Francisco, to come to some events, and I'm the one that meets them on this side. So it's a beautiful thing. I wish I could actually ride back with them on the boat ride because it's very fun for them. With that in mind, I was wondering if SFMTA can, and I think I've brought in this item before and I can't remember the answer, but if we can partner again with the Chase Center, the ballpark, and all the different corporations that are actually benefiting from people riding the ferry and coming to the city to enjoy those events, so that these multi-million and billion-dollar corporations can somehow also contribute to the cost of the improvements, because they are directly benefiting from
the people who are attending these events, and they're not cheap. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Are there any other questions or comments from members? Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Your 2 minutes begins now.
John Roberts, District 1 resident. I just am grateful that everybody asked for the source of the numbers because they seemed high for the ferry terminal. And when you get those numbers, also whether the estimates are based on new usage or transferred usage from existing ferry or other methods, or if it just is transferring from cars. It's 1,350 people per workday, or trips per workday, based on those estimates. So that's I don't know how many people sit on a ferry, but it seems quite high. Thank you.
I just wanted to respond to the public comment. The correction that we all received that we were confused by was that the numbers are annual, not daily.
If I did the math wrong, it's 260 weekdays in a year. So divide the 300,000 by 260. I was not including the special events.
Is there any additional public comment in the room? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
There is no remote public comment on this item. Thank you.
Great. I have a motion and a second to approve item 5. Moved by Member Barr, seconded by Member Margarita. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote? We can take this same house, same call without objection. Yes? Okay, great. Item 5 is approved. Thanks again for the presentation. Okay, moving on to item 6, adopt a motion of support to amend the Prop K standard grant agreement for the Potrero Yard Modernization Project. And we have Rail Program Manager Jesse Kaler here to start off this item, followed by SFMTA's Chris Lazaro, Project Director for Potrero Yard Modernization Project.
Jesse Kaler, Program Manager with the TA, and we are joined by a number of MTA staff, and actually our colleague Bonnie Jean will start from MTA, and then we'll here in the room, and then we'll have Chris Lazaro online for the balance of the presentation. I will start with a brief introduction of this item, and in particular speak to the specific SFCTA staff recommendation that is a funding component that is before you this evening. We'll then have MTA go through a presentation with a broader project update on this project that's of a lot of interest. So just briefly, the Potrero Yard Modernization Project will replace the existing bus yard in the Mission District. That yard has been in continuous operation for Muni since 1915. In 2021, the Board of Supervisors granted the SFMTA authority to deliver the project through a public-private partnership approach. And in 2022, through a competitive procurement process, SFMTA selected the Potrero Neighborhood Collective as the developer partner to work with the city to advance the project. In February 2021, the Transportation Authority Board allocated $5.8 million in Prop K funds to support the development of the project. Of that amount, $1 million was designated to fund compensation to those proposers not selected to serve as the project's lead developer through that competitive procurement process, in order to reflect the proposers' professional service activities during their participation in that process. SFMTA ultimately used non-Prop K funds for this professional services reimbursement. Yesterday, the Board of Supervisors approved the infrastructure facility project agreement for the project with the developer team, following the SFMTA Board's approval of this contract earlier this month. Under that project agreement, The developer will be responsible for finalizing the project's design, completing construction, and financing capital costs over an up to 30-year term following construction. Under this design, build, finance, or DBF model, the SFMTA will be obligated to compensate the developer through 2 successive milestone payments, followed by annual availability payments over the 30-year financing term. The first milestone payment of $65 million will be due to the developer at the financial close of the contract planned for next month. SFMTA has requested an amendment to the 2021 Prop K allocation in order to allow the $1 million in funding not used for professional services reimbursement during the procurement phase to be applied to this milestone payment. All other funding sources for milestone payment number 1 have been secured, including $42 million in MTC Regional Measure 3 funds, which were allocated in December. Our SFCTA staff recommendation is to amend the 2021 Prop K grant to permit the requested use of. We will continue to work with MTA closely as the project moves forward into active delivery. MTA staff will now provide an overall project update, which will have more information on scope, schedule, and funding. And MTA staff and I will be available to address questions following that presentation. With that, I'll turn things over to Bob.
Hello, I'm
Yes, you do.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Jean Von Crow. Thank you, Jesse. Hi, I'm Bonnie Jean Von Crow. I'm the Public Affairs Manager for the SFMTA's Building Progress Program. The Potrero Yard Modernization Project is the flagship project in that program. So thank you so much for having us today, Chair, Committee, to talk a little bit about that recent approval that Jesse just described at the Board of Supervisors yesterday, who voted unanimously in favor of the project, which solidified the project agreement. And then we will also talk a little bit about the legislation that went before the SFMTA Board of Directors previously, I think a week and a half ago now, 2 weeks ago, which was has to do with the housing portion of the agreement. So we'll present on both, give you an update on the project and the specifics around the agreements. I am joined by my colleagues, Chris Lazaro, project director, as well as Tim Kemp, the project manager, for questions. So to talk a little bit about the need of the project, I think it's important to note that, this project is the culmination of more than 8 years of work on the project, both with the SFMTA staff, but also directly with the community. We, the MTA, identified a strong need for this project, but really worked closely with the community throughout the project. And so, for us, delivering the Potrero Yard, a new Potrero Yard, is the highest priority of our Building Progress Facilities program. So you see here, the yard is 111 years old this year. It's functionally obsolete, and so it's very important to us to ensure that our staff can work in a modern facility. They are right now challenged by the space, the equipment, the working conditions that really date back to 19. Additionally, the yard is just operating at crush capacity and is seismically unsafe. And we very much appreciate it that it is part of the ESSER bond that is going before voters in June to address this seismic need. To talk a little bit about the project scope, the new Potrero Yard will really have an outsized impact on transit for San Francisco. It will allow us to deliver reliable muni service and provide our staff with that modern facility that's resilient and safe to really get our service out every day in a reliable way. It will accommodate more than 2/3 more electric trolley buses that are there right now, so allow for that expansion, and then provide, it consolidates training facilities as well, and we'll talk a little bit about the affordable housing adjacent to the yard at that site that is being enabled by this project. To just talk a little bit about service, when we talk about building a facility like a yard, really, it's more than just improvements at that one location, because those improvements go across the city in the routes that come out of the yard. I mean, we're looking at a map of the routes that we closed Potrero Yard to service just recently in February, but previous to that, it was operating routes that served over 95,000 of our weekday bus ridership. So our second highest ridership in the Muni system for our bus yards. You can see the routes that come out of Potrero Yard. All of those routes, I think it's important to note, serve Muni service equity communities. So those are the people who rely on Muni the most. And so this is really a workhorse of a yard, and the benefits is really an equity-first approach that this project will deliver in terms of benefits to Muni service. To talk a little bit about partnerships across the city, we're very appreciative of working within the city family, certainly very closely with the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, with the Office of Economic and Workforce Development on aspects of this project, as well as with the San Francisco Planning Department and public. So this truly was a partnership across the city to make this milestone project happen and come to reality. We have extremely high staff support for this project. You see a couple quotes featured by our on-the-ground staff at Potrero Yard. These are from our maintenance folks. And really, while both our operations and maintenance benefit from this project with the new work environment, our operators are out in the field every day driving buses, right? And the maintenance folks are the ones who are at the yard 24/7. This is an operating yard that operates 24/7, who will really see really strong benefits and efficiency with the improvements of a new yard. And here are some photos we had as we said goodbye to the old Potrero Yard. And you can really see what this means to the SFMTA staff. We had just staff, retired staff, staff who are now work at other divisions, come back, celebrate Potrero, celebrate that we'll be bringing a brand new yard here for the community and for staff. And then you see on the photo at the right, that is the final pull-in on Valentine's Day, just a month ago of the last bus to pull in the yard. And we actually had community there, about a dozen folks to welcome that bus for its final pull-in. And now I will hand it over to Chris Lazaro, a project director, to talk a little bit about where we are in the project timeline, what's to come, and then some of the details of the project agreement and the housing agreement. Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Bonnie Jean. Good evening, committee members. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. I think Jesse kind of highlighted a little bit at the beginning, but in terms of the timeline, we're excited to be able to move into this next phase from the many years of planning into now, the final design and construction of the bus yard this year. And so if you just notice a couple of dates here, the yard begins construction this year in 2026 and is expected to open by the middle of 2030. And then next to the bus yard on the same property is an affordable housing development, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And then as that housing developer is able to secure funding, then construction would happen potentially concurrently, but certainly on the same site. Next slide. So this is a broader overview of the project site and the design and an evolution of the project over time. So on the left, I will see the project variants that were entitled back in 2024. The development of housing was always core to our vision, but always subject to funding sources and feasibility for that because the SFMTA does not fund housing. And so, we had a version of the project that included housing both along Bryant Street, which is to the west, as well as housing above the bus yard, which would have been the first project of its kind, really, in North America, to include housing with a bus maintenance and operations facility. And so with that, we also had a project variant, which enabled us to use that podium to house our paratransit fleet in the event that that future podium housing could not be financed. And so as we moved into 2025 and were faced with the pricing realities of this current market, and also SFMTA's financial crisis, and with both of those kind of combined, as well as all of the changes to construction costs, interest rates, and market volatility since both before the pandemic and even immediately following, really resulted in us needing to make some changes to be able to lower the cost of design and construction and ensure that we can stay on schedule to deliver this much needed bus yard. And so on the right here, you'll see the final project after those changes. And so it does reduce the amount of housing that we would be able to deliver on the site. But it was important that we retain the ability to have that proposed Bryant Street housing. And so we'll again talk a little bit more about that as well. Next slide. So just to focus a little bit more on this, the biggest change that was made is that we removed the roof and the podium, which is what, along with a more strengthened bus yard building all the way down to the foundation, would have allowed us to have that future development potential. And so by removing that, that brought the price of this project in terms of design and construction down to a price that the agency could reasonably afford, with the knowledge that that does eliminate that opportunity to construct that future housing podium housing or the paratransit facility above the bus yard. But on the next slide, we want to highlight a couple of things here. You can see some draft renderings first. A proposal of the housing that is still within the project is shown here on the left. That is a view from Bryant and Mariposa Street, which is right next to or across from KQED. And then at the opposite corner of 17th and Hampshire, we can see a view of the bus yard. And to the right there would be Franklin Square Park. Next slide. The project has, as Bonnie Jean said, done really comprehensive bilingual outreach throughout the project, from dating all the way back to 2018. And so, we are, at the bottom left, we see here the neighborhood working group. They've been really integral to this project. And so they've really shaped a lot of how this project has evolved over time. Next slide. And what I wanted to also highlight in terms of the overall design, while we did have to obviously make a pretty large change to the project last year, we really did work hard to retain as many of the public amenities that the community really wanted to see in this project as much as possible. And so that includes things like a publicly accessible meeting space, a community room in the building. Another one being the public restroom that would be in this facility and available to park goers at Franklin Square Park across the street, which does not currently have a permanent public restroom. Enhanced streetscape all around the block, as well as some upgraded bicycle infrastructure. And in addition, 2 retail spaces are proposed within the Bryant Street housing development. And that would be, the goal is to have those be community serving retail spaces. Next slide. So moving into how the agency is planning to pay for the project over time on the next slide. Following many months of negotiations, the SFMTA and Potrero Neighborhood Collective reached a final fixed price for the bus yard facility of $612 million. And so like purchasing a home with a mortgage, Potrero Yard is financed over a 30-year period, and that is with the public-private partnership. And so, as was mentioned earlier, the SFMTA has a series of 2 milestone payments that are due at different points. The first milestone payment will be due upon financial close, which we're expecting to happen next month. And then the second milestone payment, which is a larger payment of $250 million, would be made upon completion of construction of the bus yard. And so that those 2 payments together could be kind of seen as like a down payment. And then the availability payments are annual payments that we make over a 30-year term, starting after completion of the bus yard. And so that's kind of seen as like the mortgage payments that we would be making. And so there's a number of sources for all of these payments. I want to emphasize that our annual payments are made from capital fund sources, so they don't impact the SFMTA's operating budget, which I know many people are paying attention to, especially in light of a lot of the concerns around how budget impacts might affect transit service. But we just want to highlight that to make sure that we're not, creating confusion that we're using the transit dollars to be able to do this. Next slide. One small piece that I think is still worth highlighting is that there is a project labor agreement as part of this contract. And what that really enables us to, or ensures for the community, is that we are using skilled union labor here on the site. Next slide. So along with the project agreement that enables the design build contractor to move forward on the bus yard, concurrent with that is also a housing agreement, or it's actually on the next slide, it's a lease development and disposition agreement. And so that enables the team known as Mighty, which is Meta and Tabernacle Community Development Corporation, to continue moving forward on development of this Bryant Street affordable housing. So here we just want to highlight that this bus yard design continues to show the SFMTA's commitment to affordable housing and enables the ability for approximately 100 units of affordable housing along Bryant Street. And that is family housing. So there are units ranging from studios all the way up to 3-bedroom units. As we've talked about, construction is dependent on the housing developer's ability to secure funding. And then I mentioned the 2 community serving retail spaces as well. Next slide. So our SFMTA Board of Directors approved the lease development and disposition agreement earlier in the month. And this sets all the terms for the proposed housing and for a future ground lease. So the SFMTA will retain ownership of this land over the long term, but we lease it to these developers to be able to provide this affordable housing. And so there's a 75-year ground lease term with an option to renew. And this is similar to how Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development works with other affordable housing developers throughout the city. And so once the housing developers actually achieve their funding and are ready to close and begin construction, then the actual ground lease would be brought to the Board of Supervisors at that time to begin construction. And so the next steps, just want to show kind of on the calendar here. We've talked about, the Board of Directors made their approval, and then the full Board of Supervisors just yesterday approved the project agreement unanimously, which we're very excited about and grateful for. And so from here, financial close, as I've said, happens next month, hopefully, with site investigation and utility work beginning just very shortly thereafter, with actual demolition of the building and the vertical construction starting early in 2027. And so that, I believe, that concludes our presentation. But as I think Bonnie Jean mentioned at the beginning, certainly she can help with questions, but also Tim Kemp, who is our project manager, is also available here online for questions.
Thank you all so much for the presentation. Do any members have questions or comments? Member Ortega?
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. It's very helpful to get a nice update. There's just two things I wanted to ask. First is a clarification question. Based on the memo and what we discussed, what we're approving here today is the allocation of the $1 million from the design fund to be used in the first financial payment. Is that the scope of what we are voting on today?
Essentially, yes, Member Ortega. I'll just clarify that it's not a new allocation. It's simply an amendment of that past allocation.
Yes, I can clarify that. I did read in the budget that there was no fiscal change because the $1 million had already been allocated in previous design study. So thank you. I think my second question, and this is perhaps a little bit odder, why are we, it seems like when I look at that design for the housing, it seems like it's height limited. Is there a reason, or is it like a structural thing? And then to follow up with that, is there an option to build the housing in the future if it can't get secured in funding now? That wasn't clear to me listening to the whole presentation and reading the documentation. I know that we cannot build on top of the yard with the current plan, but in that 104 unit Bryant Street lot, I guess my first question is there any way to add more vertical height to that apartment building to potentially gain back some of the apartments we lost that can't go over the rail yard? And my second question is, if the funding is not secured for the housing section because MTA cannot fund housing, what is the option for that going forward if we cannot secure housing funding and we need to continue the project? So I guess that was a two-part question. I cheated.
No, that's great. Thank you. So in terms of the housing design, the version that you saw in the rendering is very much a draft version. The height that was actually entitled was significantly higher than what you are seeing there in that rendering. And as as the developers are moving forward, we're both certainly interested in being able to increase the number of units that are built on that parcel, but recognizing that there is a limitation in the dimensions of that parcel are creating what's called a single loaded building, meaning that we're in an apartment building. When you have a hallway, typically you would have apartments on both sides of that hallway. But because of the dimensions here, they can only have units on one side of the hallway. And so just because of the, there is some inherent inefficiency, I guess, in that. And so there is a limitation in how high they can go before the type of construction changes. And therefore, the cost of that construction jumps pretty significantly. And then on a cost per unit standpoint, that definitely changes the financial feasibility of the project. So the team is really working to try to strike that balance of keeping the construction to something that is more affordable to build, while also maximizing the number of units that they can actually deliver on the site. So we're supportive of them continuing that design work going forward. And so, you know, there is, of course, again, room for that building to get a little bit taller, potentially in order to accommodate that. But it will depend on whether that project is still financially feasible and whether it's financeable. Can they actually get the necessary funding, like through tax credits and state funding, local funding, to be able to move forward with that project? And I think the other part of your question is how it impacts the bus yard design. So the bus yard design moves forward independently of the housing. And there's kind of a nuance in the housing agreement where if the same contractor who is delivering the bus yard, and that's Webcor, they're local here to San Francisco, if they also reach an agreement to deliver the Bryant Street housing, then there is an opportunity for both the bus yard and the housing to be under construction at the same time, given that they're coordinating their own crews. And so there's an ability to do that. If they're not able to do that and they have to go to market and find another contractor to build that housing, then they would only be able to start construction on that housing as soon as the bus yard is complete.
Okay, but that does, so I think you roundabout answered my actual question. So basically, unless the developer of the bus yard is also chosen as the developer for the housing cannot be built simultaneously as the bus yard. However,
the contractor, yes.
Housing can be built post bus yard completion. So we could continue to solicit bids for housing to be built on that, I'm going to call it a parcel. I understand that may not be the proper term here. Parcel after the bus yard completion. So like finding a contractor pre-construction is not going to stop housing. Like we can still build the housing even if we can't find the contractor right now, basically.
That's right.
Like
so
later.
the LDDA, or the Lease Development and Disposition Agreement, spells out a schedule that they have to follow. And so they're given up to 2 years after the bus yard is complete to start construction on the housing. So that's kind of, for us, it's sort of considered worst case scenario for it to go that long. We all would certainly love for the construction to start sooner than that, but they do have the flexibility. And that all depends, again, on both the contractor, if they're able to use the same contractor, and how long it takes them to be able to actually win award of funding to be able to use on the project.
Thank you.
Member Kim?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to ask a similar question. So depends on contractors, financial situation. We cannot build a housing until we complete the bus yard construction. So it might happen at the same time or happen later, but we don't know schedule, right?
The schedule for the housing component is not yet final. That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. And then my second question is, you already explained the height limit. Seems like lower than we expected because there's parcel size has some limitation. But maybe I can ask you again. This is a new remodeling bus yard. It's a huge yard. It's probably you discovered every single options. But could you explain why is so limited? Because, probably when we remodeling bus yard, maybe housing, we can make little scale size, or, there must be some room to modify. But could you explain those limitations? I understand, you already discovered all the things, but as a, citizen, we don't understand. It's a huge yard, and then we're gonna rebuild the bus yard again. But why the parcel dimension is so limited?
Sure, I can start, and then if Tim wants to add on, I think he certainly knows more of the details than I do. But the basic premise, as I understand it, is that the bus yard needed to be these dimensions in order to allow for the proper circulation of the trolley buses inside of the facility. And if we made any significant modification to the dimensions of the bus yard, it would have pretty drastically changed the number of buses that we could reasonably get into the facility and to maintain at the site. Tim, did I cover everything, or did you want to add to that?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, only additionally 246 buses pulling in and out on a daily basis and getting maintaining the proper clearance through, the array of columns at each level, and allowing safe turning radiuses, as you can imagine, within this facility for as many buses as that is requires the footprint that we have in the current design. And then the remaining parcel is what's left over.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
Member Margarita?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and the explanation. I understand now that there's no impact to the adopted fiscal year 2025-2026 budget since these funds were previously allocated. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was just interested in the housing part of it. I understand that it's quote-unquote affordable housing, and that's neither here nor there because SFMTA can't necessarily own the housing, but I was just interested in knowing if you are aware of the 80% of area median income. I was just interested in that to see what that would be since it's targeted to quote-unquote affordable housing.
Yes, that percentage is exactly right. So all of the units at Bryant Street would be for families earning up to 80% of the area median income.
No, and so my question was, what is that area median income? If you
Oh,
are
I see.
aware.
Let me.
I was just wondering.
I can confirm that. I can come back to that though.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development publishes a list of what that specifically is each year, so it changes based on the year. So Chris may be able to look it up for what it is this year.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, because I know affordable housing is thrown out there, but because of the income of folks here in San Francisco, affordable housing can sometimes be $150,000 a year, which is a lot, right? And so I'm just wondering what quote-unquote affordable housing is.
I do have it. So for the 2025 chart that's on the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development's website, the 2026 numbers are not yet published. The maximum income for a family of four is currently $124,700.
And just to add, that's at the 80% AMI level, but this housing is up to 80% AMI. So I think I've heard the developers talk about, as low as maybe 30% AMI for some of the units. So it's a range.
And then does that mean that affordable housing, since this project is supposed to be completed by 2030, that affordable housing will be available to families or folks right around that time period, or it could be much later?
I think it's important to note that the bus yard facility will be completed by 2030. And so that timeline that Chris was talking about the housing, it really depends when that would be available, when they start to, when they completed. I believe it's around a 2-year estimated timeline for construction of the housing. And so, and then units would only be available after that.
Thank you.
Member Bars.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Thank you. I could ask lots of questions, but I'm going to demonstrate restraint, Chair. I am. I'm going to ask you just one question. I was reading the memo last night, and I was so perplexed by one sentence. I raised it to several, WhatsApp chat of a lot of D7 residents, let's put it that way. And it is the sentence, SFMTA is prohibited by the city charter from funding housing design or construction. Why is SFMTA prohibited for funding or financing housing design or construction?
I can take that one. So we're the transportation agency of the city. And so, that really is wise. That's part of our mission and what drives us. And so our funds that we receive are restricted for transportation purposes.
I appreciate the simplicity of that answer, but I am a member of the CAC. We deal with a lot of very complicated funding topics. We've been talking about housing for about 15 minutes. There's lots of different kinds of funds that SFMTA receives, and I'm just is there backstory or background as to why the city employs people to do a lot of different things besides operate buses? So is there why would they explicitly prohibit the financing of housing?
I can jump in with just a little bit of context on that. The original conception of the project, MTA leading the project, but that in the accounting of the project, MTA was always quite careful to understand the costs of the transit part of the project and the housing part of the project. And in order for both to go forward in their full original conceived manner, it would have required sufficient non-transportation money, i.e. housing dollars, provided by another entity than MTA to come forward. That level of funding and financing was not forthcoming, and given the imperative to deliver this project in order to run Muni's trolley bus fleet, City and MTA had to make the difficult decision to move forward with the transit project with a reduced potential for housing, given that the construction of the facility in a manner that would permit the future potential for that greater level of housing directly above the yard came at a cost construction of that facility that had to be offset. And unfortunately, there was not enough additional money to close that gap, and the difficult recommendation was brought forward to reduce the housing potential and keep it simply to the Bryant Street housing that Chris described.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Truly, thank you for that answer. That is what I gleaned. There just wasn't enough money. Things are very expensive. We had to reduce our aspirations for the housing. I also recognize that we are a transportation funding authority. I frankly care more about the fact that we're getting a sweet new bus yard that's seismically retrofit and it's going to work for 68% more buses. Let's do it. I like it. We could talk, this is San Francisco. We could talk about the housing for a while, I think. But I just really this sentence. We can't do housing. I'm flummoxed. I work with transit agencies all over the world. I'm perplexed by the sentence. So I'd love to better understand the limitation in the city charter that's prohibiting housing in the future from SFMTA funding or financing housing in the future.
We can certainly provide you with the context from the city charter and with that language to the committee.
Thanks all again for the presentation. I have a just very simple question. What would have been the minimum cost of the project if the podium had been included to enable potential additional housing development in the future?
So when we received pricing from the contractor early last year, it was about 30% higher than what we were anticipating the cost to come in at. And so if we were to, at this point, go back and from today on and try to put that back into the project, we would likely be at least probably 30% higher in our just design and construction cost of the bus yard over where we are today, which was at the final price we negotiated was at 612 million.
Okay, so it would have been like about closer to 200 million more. Okay. Helpful to understand. Are there any other questions or comments from members? If not, is there any public comment in the room on this item? Like there's one. Oh, 1 second while we.
Your 2 minutes begins now.
The questions regarding housing and using transportation dollars indicated to me I have to do some research, because you have the Valley Transportation Authority in Santa Clara County. That is, the VTA is kind of a combination of this agency and Muni together down there. But they have just completed the Tamian Station housing, and they've got a complete program underway to do the Kirtner Station, because bottom line, the park and ride lots are empty for the light rail. So they're going to convert that over. So, and also I've heard that BART does housing on some of their parking lots. So yeah, I have no answer, but it certainly brings questions to my mind to do some research and try to figure out where the separation of the funds are and the policy that's been established. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
Yes, we have one caller. Roland, let's see, go ahead. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Very briefly, I'd appreciate the opportunity to set the record straight as to what happened at Tamian. The east side of the tracks is not VGA, it's a Caltrain station, it's a Caltrain parking lot. And the best thing we had on the east side is that we had a daycare, and there were 75 dedicated parking spaces to the daycare. So the parents, actually, I knew some of them because I was riding Caltrain with them on the way to the city. Essentially, were able to be really close by, get all the stuff they needed with their children, take it inside for the school, and then basically get onto Caltrain. And the director of real estate at the time opined that really these parents, rather than riding Caltrain, should really be driving their children closer to their place of employment. And no, I'm not making that stuff up. But the bottom line is that all that is gone. Now, the empty parking that Mr. Mason is referring to is actually on the other side of the Highway 85, which is a VTA site, which is true. It's completely empty. But it serves as an overflow for Caltrain, and now that we have lost so many parking spaces. Last point I'd like to make about VTA, they also want to do development at Cirone. Cirone used to be reserved for VTA employees so that they could have RVs and live in their RVs during the week and then, drive home during the weekends. And they basically shut them all down, told all the employees to go away because they wanted to redevelop it and put permanent housing on the old RV site. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. There are no other remote public comments for item 6.
Great, thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve this item, moved by Member Margarita, seconded by Member Bars. Madam Clerk, could we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve item 6, Potrero Yard Amendment, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels. Daniels absent. Member Ford. Ford absent. Member Imadadeen. Imadadeen absent. Member Kim.
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine. Levine absent. Member Margarita.
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 6 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great, thanks so much. We'll move on to item 7, adopt a motion of support to approve a 2-year professional services contract with HNTB Corporation for consulting services for the Pennsylvania Avenue Extension Bridging Study. And we welcome back Jesse Kaler, Rail Program Manager.
Hi again, members. This item is a consultant contract award recommendation for a planning and design study regarding the Pennsylvania Avenue Extension, also known as the PAX project. The PAX project was originally identified through what was known as the RAB study, the Rail Yard Alignment and Benefit Study, which was completed by the Planning Department in 2018. The RAB established San Francisco's preferred long-term alignment for the Caltrain corridor through San Francisco, including confirming the alignment of the Portal project, also known as the Downtown Rail Extension, to connect to the Salesforce Transit Center. The Portal project is currently in the procurement phase and has a planned opening date of 2036, subject to the completion of the project's funding plan. The RAB also established the broad alignment for the future tunneled PAX project beneath 7th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue in order to separate rail from grade crossings at the Caltrain corridor's 2 remaining at-grade crossings in San Francisco at Mission Bay Drive and 16th Street. In 2022, the Transportation Authority completed the PAX project initiation study, which was a first phase of planning and conceptual design work for the project. The initiation study looked at several different design and tunneling configurations within the broad PAX alignment. The study also advanced preliminary analysis of the project's interfaces with adjacent projects, including the Portal. The PAX project will connect directly to the Portal at the site of Caltrain's 4th and King rail yards, which extends along Townsend Street between 7th and 4th Street. The rail yard site is owned by Prologis, a private entity, and Caltrain holds a property easement granting the right to use the site for transit use in perpetuity. For several years, Caltrain, Prologis, and the other partnering stakeholders have been considering the opportunity to develop a portion of the rail yard site for mixed-use, transit-oriented development. Earlier this month, I'm on the wrong slide, apologies. Earlier this month, Prologis submitted a development application to the city reflecting a potential long-term build-out of the site in 2 phases as shown in this diagram. Transportation Authority will lead the PAX bridging study with a particular focus on the interfacing projects of the Portal and the rail yard site development proposal. Our approach to this work is somewhat unique for a project development exercise, as we acknowledge that we do not anticipate aggressively moving this project forward toward environmental and construction in the near term. Rather, our primary aim is to identify and confirm, working with our partners, technical approach to protect for the medium to long-term ability to construct PAX in the future, even as these related projects, such as the Portal and the rail yard site development, move forward years ahead of the PAX project. In order to select an engineering and planning consultant team to conduct the study, working in partnership with the Transportation Authority and our other partnering agencies, we conducted a competitive procurement process over the course of the last few months. We had 6 proposals, and we were quite glad to have this level of interest from the consultant community. The evaluation panel, with participation from SFMTA and Transportation Authority staff, recommended HNTB as the highest ranked firm based on the criteria defined in the request for proposal. With that, our staff recommendation is to support the approval of a 2-year professional services contract with HNTB. I'm happy to address your questions on this or the project as a whole, and we look forward to coming back to the CAC with an update on the study as we get going. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from members? Member Ortega?
Hi. I'm sorry, I'm clearly very tired today. I am forgetting a lot. When would the project actually begin construction? What does the timeline for that look like again? I just can't remember.
We are actually being quite careful and clear in this case to say that, and honest, to say we don't have a construction schedule for this project.
So it is not me not remembering something. It is that we have not decided when it would be based on, I'm thinking a variety of things, including the portal project in general.
If I may, one of the things that has, the RAB study that I spoke to in 2018, this was prior to the pandemic, and it was also as the high-speed rail program was getting going, and we as San Francisco were preparing, and in fact are still preparing, for a long-term future in which there could be a level of service on the Caltrain corridor of up to 12 Caltrains per hour and 4 high-speed rail trains per hour, which is 4 times the number of trains that currently cross those at-grade crossings, really creating an untenable situation for the 22 Fillmore, for residents of Mission Bay, for all sorts of street users. And so that was really what drove the conception of the PAX project originally. Of course, here we are in 2026. We are working very hard to get the portal project fully funded and move that into construction. We're also working to support Caltrain in its aspirations for the rail yard site. As those other big projects go forward, we want to make sure that our successors, planners and engineers, 10 years, 15 years from now, as they confront a potential to deliver the PAX project, that we have made sure that the decisions we make today in this program of projects are sufficiently forward compatible to that long-term vision, given all of these constraints.
Okay, that helps me understand this a little bit. Because I guess, like, I will say I'm very passionate about getting underground trains and high-speed rail to the city. Like, my honeymoon is booked, and we are taking a 9-day train tour of Switzerland. So like, I want more trains, and I want them underground because I don't like having grade crossings. It creates a lot of risk. There's a lot of concerns with traffic, congestion, cars that get stuck. My partner was on Caltrain the other day, and he had to wait an hour and a half because a car decided to go over the grade during a stoplight, and train, yeah. And it's like really tragic, but it's also like the train always wins, but it causes like a lot of issues. So like I understand like why we need to have grade separation. I'm just trying to get an understanding of where this project slots in to the timeline that we are talking about. And I think that's perhaps why I've been so confused, is because it's more where you're doing a lot of groundwork. So that way, when we come back and are ready to begin some of the construction aspects, it's like much later. So thank you for clarifying that. I also just wanted to comment, I'm very excited to hear you got 6 bids. That's actually quite impressive to me. So go trains.
Are there any other questions or comments from members on this item? If not, is there any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Operators, or any remote public comment on this item?
Yes, there is one remote public comment. Roland. Okay. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you. So as a way of background, the RAB study started in 2013 and lasted 5 years. I actually designed the PAX 18 months before the onset of the RAB study. I'm going to give you a 2-minute preview of the letter I'm about to write to the Board of Supervisors because it is about the worst contractor you could possibly select. These people were responsible for the Alaska Way project disaster in Seattle that included a 100-foot sinkhole. They've wasted so far $130 million in BART Measure R funds which were, dedicated to the Link 21 projects. Until the bar board said enough is enough, at which point they had come up with a cost estimate for a new Transbay tunnel of $29 billion. Last but not least, they were responsible for Bar to San Jose cost estimate tripling from $4.7 billion to over $13 billion. And have so far caused $12 million worth of damage to the adjacent Union Pacific tracks in Santa Clara. And actually, not last but not least, they also the people who are responsible who have increased the cost estimate for the LA to Las Vegas line from $12 billion to $20 billion, which basically means that the line is dead right now. So in closing, in my letter to both of us, I'm going to show you exactly what these people are going to do. They're going to dig a massive trench all the way from Cesar Chavez all the way to 22nd Street, just so that their machine can start the digging. And then they're going to carry on and explain to you how you should spending north of $2 billion to actually get down to 7th Street and connect to the portal. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. There's no further remote public comment.
Member Bars.
Thank you, Chair. Just when I was reviewing this memo, I was focused more on the need for the study and what it was going to do, and just trying to understand the PACs in the context of the RAB and the portal, because it's a lot of detail. I think as you're nodding, Mr. Kaler. Thank you. There's a lot, right? I actually didn't really think about why HNTB versus someone else. And I'm just wondering, given Mr. LeBrun's comment, I'm just wondering if you could give me really the 30-second spiel, why HNTB over the others?
Thanks for that question, Member Bars. I do first want to clarify just sort of the scope of their engagement. It is not a final design engagement. It is not certainly a construction or construction management or program management at the detailed level of final design or delivery. We are looking for a team that brings engineering expertise, planning competency, and the ability to support us in engaging with our partners, because this work is really about making sure that we protect for the ability to construct PACs in the future, and it requires a real deep understanding of both conceptual design for tunnels, but also of related projects, not just the portal and rail yards that I've emphasized, but also things like utility infrastructure that also is in this whole jumble. And so the HNTB team distinguished itself across the evaluation committee for this proposal based on all of those factors. And also it was an evaluation. HNTB is the prime firm in a team of multiple firms, including LBE, SBE, DBE firms that as a whole were the top ranked firm, and we're confident in their ability to work effectively with us and the other partners in this study.
Okay, thank you for that. And I didn't see in the memo, there is no published evaluation matrix for this. Is that a standard? Well, let me take a step back. I am aware that procurements don't always allow you to share how you selected a bidder. I'm just curious, is that the kind of thing that is publicly available in this instance, or no?
The request for proposals is a public document, and that defined a set of evaluation criteria that the procurement committee used to evaluate proposals. The detailed results of that information are not typically provided in the recommendation, but they are part of the record, the procurement record for the process.
If there are no other questions or comments, can I get a motion and a second to approve this item? Moved by Member Bars, seconded by Member Milford Rosales. And I believe we could take this same house, same call without objection. Item is approved. Thank you again so much for the presentation. All right, we'll move on to item 8. Adopt a motion of support for San Francisco's One Bay Area Grant Cycle 4 County Framework. And we have Transportation Planner Erin Slichter, who will lead us through this next presentation. I'm so sorry, I'm having trouble sharing slides. I got it. Okay. All right, good evening. My name is Erin Slichter. I'm a planner in the Policy and Programming Division at SFCTA. This item is to adopt the San Francisco One Bay Area Grant Cycle 4 County Program Framework. So in the presentation, I'll first give an introduction to the One Bay Area Grant Program, and then our framework, which is up for adoption, includes recommendations for funding set-asides for congestion management agency planning work and for the Safe Roads to School non-infrastructure program. The framework also includes the screening and prioritization criteria that we'll use to evaluate applications through a competitive call for projects. I'll cover towards the end of the presentation, and after that, SFMTA staff will present more information about the Safe Roads to School non-infrastructure program. The One Bay Area Grant, or OBAG, is a program that's administered by MTC that directs federal surface transportation program and congestion mitigation and air quality funds. These funds are distributed across a series of programs, including both regional and county programs that support implementation of Plan Bay Area. MTC's approach to the county program is designed to incorporate MTC policy initiatives, advance equity and safety, and emphasize a partnership with county transportation authorities like SFCTA to identify local priorities and administer the program within each county. This is the biggest pot of discretionary funding that the Transportation Authority has authority to help prioritize, and so we go through this process to identify San Francisco priorities for each cycle roughly every 4 years. We are now gearing up for the 4th cycle of OBAG. This covers fiscal years 2026-27 through 2029-30. Region-wide in this cycle, there are $319 million available, and funding is targeted for investment in priority development areas and transit-oriented communities. Out of that $319 million pot, part of it is for the county program, which provides flexibility for counties to invest in local priorities. As the Congestion Management Agency, or CMA, for San Francisco, the TA is responsible for nominating projects for the county program up to a target funding amount that considers population and housing factors. And then once we nominate our San Francisco project priorities, it's ultimately up to MTC to evaluate the nominations and select projects to be awarded funding. There are a wide variety of eligible project types for OBAG. You can see a few listed on the slide. These include transit reliability and access improvements, safety and streetscape improvements, complete streets, safe routes to school, and state of good repair for transit and local roads. In previous cycles, we funded various transit projects, such as the 29 Sunset Improvement Project, Caltrain electrification, BART elevator modernization, as well as local road safety or complete streets projects, like Central Embarcadero safety improvements and the Yerba Buena Island multi-use pathway. And we've also funded the Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure program in prior cycles, and this program funds efforts like Walk and Roll to School Week and walking school buses. And I'll just note, because we often get questions about this, that for MTC's guidelines and federal requirements, OBAG county funds are generally not eligible to be used for operations projects, so like for transit operations, or for air quality non-exempt projects, such as those that would expand roadway capacity. MTC has established a funding target for each county, and that's based on population and housing factors. And they are asking that CMAs submit nominations for 120% of the target to ensure that there are enough projects to select from. The San Francisco 100% target this cycle is $47.2 million, and the 120% target that you can see in the table is $56.7 million, and that's spread over the 4 fiscal years. So on this slide in the table, we are showing our funding set-aside recommendations. And firstly, as part of the OBEG framework, MTC makes a certain amount of CMA planning funding available for each county. And consistent with previous OBEG cycles and other CMAs, we recommend augmenting our base CMA planning funds that we're receiving from MTC with some of our county funds. For OBEG 4, we recommend augmenting this by about $2.2 million, or that's about 3.8% of our 120% target. And this amount keeps pace with our estimated needs for CMA planning in the next 4 years. I'll have more detail on that on the next slide, but the next set aside is for about $5.8 million for the ongoing Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure program to continue the program without gaps in funding over the next 4 years. In previous OBEG cycles, MTC had region-wide Safe Routes to School investment targets and allowed counties to prioritize Safe Routes to Schools as a set-aside. And while MTC no longer has a regional investment target for Safe Routes to School in OBEG 4, CMAs may continue to recommend a set-aside for these programs, and we're recommending doing so to provide stability to the program. Before I keep going through this table, I'm going to explain a little bit more about each of these set-asides. So first up, for CMA planning, this request would augment the CMA planning baseline funds for long-range planning, such as the San Francisco Transportation Plan and follow-on studies, as well as priority development area planning, transit-oriented community planning, equity studies, modal market surveys, and waterfront planning, among other efforts. As for Safe Routes to Schools, again, this is an ongoing program led by SFMTA in partnership with the school district and seeks to increase safety and active trips to school through a variety of programming. And Frazier, who's the project manager from SFMTA, is here with us and will present some slides about this program after my portion of the presentation. This program hosts large-scale events such as Walk and Roll to School Week and Ride Muni to School Week, as well as ongoing activities like walking school buses and bike workshops. So returning to our table, after those two set-asides, that leaves about $48.7 million for projects to be identified through an open competitive call for projects. And just as a reminder, this is the 120% target of anticipated available funds, and MTC will make the ultimate project selection. When we do that competitive call for projects, we will first be screening all applications for eligibility using a set of criteria, most of which come from MTC. We have a few listed on the slide. You can also see the full list in attachment 3 to the memo. Eligible project types, again, are transit reliability and access projects, local road safety, complete streets, and state of good repair. And I'll also note that CMAs can refine and add on to MTC's required criteria. So here we just increased the minimum project request from $250,000 to $500,000, and that's based on our experience with the extra costs and hurdles of complying with federal requirements. Then after screening for eligibility, we will use these criteria to prioritize the eligible applications. And again, this is a non-exhaustive list, and you can find the full list in your packet. As I mentioned, most of the evaluation criteria come from MTC, and CMAs are then able to add our own criteria to reflect local priorities and needs. Most of the criteria that we are proposing are retained from prior cycles of OBEG. These include things like multimodal benefits, multiple project coordination, and safety. And then I'll just call out a couple of those that are listed here. Firstly, all of San Francisco is located within a mile of a priority development area or a transit-oriented community. So that's an easy criteria for any project to meet. And then another one that I want to draw your attention to is project readiness and deliverability. This will be of particular consideration in our evaluation. Not only is this a priority for MTC's evaluation, but it's also a priority for our evaluation because we want to make sure we are nominating projects that will be able to deliver on schedule and not be at risk of losing federal funds. Overall, these criteria reflect San Francisco priorities and will allow us to line up project nominations that will be competitive in MTC's evaluation. So once we submit our project nominations and give our scores to MTC, they will do their own evaluation that considers our scores as well as regional and federal policy alignment, as I mentioned, deliverability, and also air quality benefits. And lastly, here is our proposed schedule for the call for projects. After initial board action on April 14th, we will release a call for projects and host a workshop for eligible sponsors. Applications will then be due on July 7th, and we'll come back to the CAC in September and to the board in October with our project nominations before submitting our list to MTC at the end of October. And throughout the call for projects process, we invite members of the public to share ideas for projects and feedback on applications that have been submitted. We invite comments via email or during public comment at upcoming meetings that are marked with asterisks on the slide. And those interested can also sign up to receive funding opportunity updates via email on our website. And with that, I'll invite Ben Frazier, the Program Director for Safe Routes to School on Infrastructure.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I appreciate your attention. I'm Ben Frazier. I'm a transportation planner with the SFCTA and the program coordinator for the Safe Routes to Schools Not Infrastructure program. And I'm also joined here this evening by Planning Manager John Knoxwhite in the back. So this evening for my presentation, I'll cover three main areas. First, and what most of my presentation will cover, is I'll provide an overview of the Safe Routes to School program, then on infrastructure specifically. Second, I'll talk about some of the lessons we've learned in this kind of OBAG 3 program period. And then I'll briefly talk about some of our proposed changes and a little bit about the OBAG 4 funding request. So the Safe Routes to School Non-Infrastructure Program, one of the many programmatic components of SFMTA's broader Safe Routes to School program. The Non-Infrastructure Program, or what I'll try to call from now on just the Safe Routes program, provides experiential education, encouragement, and behavior change activities and events to students and school communities across San Francisco. The program was brought over to the SFMTA in 2019, and the Safe Routes program works to support and encourage students and families to get to school using the 4 fun ways: walking and rolling, using transit or using the yellow school bus, carpooling, and biking and rolling. And we also work to help build young, confident, and independent youth travelers. We have a wide array of events and activities that I'll describe in a bit more detail in the following slides. But overall, we have 8 kind of main objectives that we strive to work towards. So firstly, we work to teach students and families practical transportation skills through interactive classes and activities like mini field trips and our bike DE classes. Second, the program encourages healthy habits and supports student mental health by promoting active and shared transportation modes to school through things like our walking school buses and bike trains. Third, the program encourages and supports the program works towards reducing congestion and increasing the visibility of people taking active modes by both getting more people to use active modes and getting them to use it in groups, which really works towards increasing that visibility. Fourth, we can help work with schools to reduce truancy by helping get students to schools consistently on time. And we can do this through supporting walking school buses and other activities that actually work to build a routine with students so that we try to build that habit with them. Fifth slide. The vast majority of our events and activities center around the 4 fun ways. That's walking and rolling, taking muni or transit in the yellow school bus, carpooling, and biking and rolling. We support students and families by helping them learn more about these modes in fun and experiential ways. 6, we work to reduce vehicle trips to school, and that does have a small but impactful impact and benefit to local air quality. All of our events thrive in groups, and so we also do build community with schools and students around transportation. And lastly, all of our activities work towards building student independence and autonomy, and we work to teach students and families how to safely and confidently navigate a lot of the many wonderful transportation options available to us within San Francisco. So now I'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the programs, events, and activities that help us work towards those objectives, starting with our 3 citywide annual events: Walk and Roll, Ride Muni to School, and Bike and Roll to School Weeks. Walk and Roll to School Week is our annual celebration of walking, typically in October, and it helps us kick off every school year. Ride Muni to School Week is our winter event, and it helps us celebrate Muni through encouraging students to ride and through some fun art contests. And then in the spring, we have Bike and Roll to School Week, which is our big celebration of biking, rolling, skateboard, scooters, where we get lots of schools involved and get everybody walking to school during typically the first week in May. And so for Walk and Roll and Bike and Roll to School Week, we specifically try to work with schools and local champions at schools to help them organize local events throughout the city. And then for Ride Muni to School Week, we do a lot of fun activities, including tabling, ride contest, art contest, and other fun interactive events. We have over a dozen different experiential events and activities that we can bring to school and school communities throughout the school year in support of the 4 Fun Ways. I won't go over the full exhaustive list here, but some of the highlights include encouragement, activity support with walking school buses and bike trains, like I've alluded to earlier. Free Muni for Youth tabling to educate students about Muni and their guardians about some of the various Muni Fair support programs out there. We also have Muni field trips that provide experiential experience that can take students on a purpose-built trip to learn how to ride Muni, or where we can provide Muni educational components on top of a pre-planned field trip. If the school is going to the Exploratorium or the zoo or something like that, we can provide some Muni education beforehand to kind of help the teacher kind of get their students there beforehand. We also have a variety of bicycle workshops, including family learn-to-rides and drop-in bike practice sessions. The past couple years, we added multiple in-classroom activities, including our long-standing multi-week bike PE sessions and our 2 new in-classroom pedestrian activities, which we have one geared for younger students and then one geared for older students. And then lastly, we do several art contests a year, and you've seen some of the art entries from this year's Ride Muni to School Week contest in the presentation, and you'll see some more of it kind of scattered throughout as well. And I also wanted to mention, in addition to these kind of activities that the program, the non-infrastructure program itself has, the non-infrastructure program does not operate in a vacuum within the SFMTA, and we do also do lots of coordination with lots of the various infrastructure and other programmatic teams around the agency, including crossing guards, parking control officers, the Muni Transit Ambassador Program, service planning, and all of these other teams that all work together to get students to and from school. And one of the other big focuses of the Safe Routes program is equity, and it is at the core of how we strive to run the program. With our budget, we can't offer every school in the city or even every SFUSD school the same level of engagement and access to activities. So we have historically developed a prioritization process to where we select about 30 schools where we prioritize both engagement and program resources. These schools have a dedicated engagement lead and have prioritized access to all of our events and activities. The prioritization itself, it includes a lot of variables. I think there were like 10 or 15 in the actual equation, but generally they centered around 2 kind of basic topics. The first was socioeconomic and transportation equity, where we tried to prioritize schools that both had higher concentrations of traffic collisions, more specifically school-related traffic collisions. And we were able to filter the collisions down to really drill down into that, and schools with higher concentrations of students who are within equity priority communities. And then the second kind of target is we, with help from the school district, we're able to understand where students live kind of relative to their campus. So at a high level, we can get a feel for where students are living close to campus, but still being driven. And so we can target those schools where we think we have a higher chance of success of some of this modal shift, because we know they're close by, but they still aren't driving for some reason. So we think we can have greater success there. And I will also mention why we do prioritize the activities for the focus schools, the 3 citywide events, and these other activities too. If we have available resources and activities within our budget, we can offer them to other SFUSD schools and even other private and chartered schools if we have the resources available to us. And I just want to quickly recap the past 2 years, or the first half of our OBAG 3 funding with some stats from that period. So in the past 2 years, we've seen some great year-over-year growth, both in terms of our schools served and program activities offered. In terms of activities offered, we've seen that go up from 155 in 23-24 up to 209 the past school year. And in terms of participating schools, and again, this is inclusive of SFUSD, charter and private from our big events and annual events and everything, we saw that number go up from 120 in 23-24 up to 179 in 24-25. And this is all school years. And so quickly, just to kind of talk about some of our lessons learned and program updates for the future. Starting out with some of the lessons learned. One of our biggest ways was to continue to seek ways to deepen our connection with the school district. The program does have funding to pay for a school district liaison, and that position is very important, and we're working with the school district to fill that position again. And we also are working with the school district to build all of our communication pathways and better ways to strengthen our relationships, especially with those non-focus schools where we don't have that direct engagement one-on-one. So that's one of our key takeaways and things we like to strive to do in the future. Secondly, historically, the program has been heavy on bicycle-related programming. So these past 2 years, we've taken a lot of great efforts to add more Muni-related and pedestrian-related programming. So things like the free Muni for youth tabling, the Muni field trips, and then those 2 new pedestrian classes, our walkable city and pedestrian safety strolls. Those are both new or revamped from prior iterations of the program in past years. So we're continuing to build out our full multimodal suite of programming. And then lastly, kind of in lieu of our relationship with the school district and schools, we found it really, really, really important to try to build relationships and find champions, both with guardians and parents and also high schoolers and school community members who can really be the champions for the change and the voice for this change at these schools. So continuing to foster and build those relationships is something we seek to do. And then just in terms of a couple bigger picture kind of program structural updates for the OBAG 4 program, we do plan to continue or carry over most of our existing events and activities, but a couple of things we plan to tweak. As I mentioned on a slide or two ago, we're going to build on a lot of the internal coordination within SFMTA, including working closer with the school walk audit program and making sure that once they build some new facilities or things by school, we're able to support walking school buses through that new infrastructure, coordination with the school, trying to make sure we're all kind of working together on the same page. Secondly, I mentioned those 2 new pedestrian-based classroom activities. Right now, we're kind of currently over there only able to serve a couple of schools a year. So one of the things we're trying to do with the district is turn it into a more formalized curriculum where it turns into something where it's something like every 3rd grader and every 9th grader gets it. And we've seen that successfully done in other school districts kind of around the state and around the country. So that's something we're hoping to work with the school district on in this contract period. And then lastly, and as always, furthering to continue our equity work, we did revamp the focus school list this past summer, and this new contract period is another opportunity to kind of look at the variables, refresh the data, see if there are new factors or new things you want to continue, to see how we can continue serving those school communities and providing them with the resources for the students that really do need it the most. And my last slide, I know almost done, it's late. So our current OBAG 3 funding will run us through June of 2027. So for this OBAG 4 cycle, we're asking for about $2 million a year for 3.3 years. The 3 years will line us back up with the end of the OBAG 4 cycle because we got 4 years in this OBAG 3, so that will line us back up. And the 0.3 years will basically kind of fill that gap between the end of the city fiscal year and the start of the federal fiscal year, basically that June to October gap. So that's kind of that weird kind of 0.3. And so as kind of alluded to earlier, this funding will allow for program stability, allow us to continue building trust and engagement with schools, allow us to continue developing and improving our programming, and most importantly, continue to work towards our 2 main goals, improve traffic safety, and get more students and families using the 4 fun ways. And with that, I thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you so much for those presentations. Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I feel like we've had the Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure program managed or mentioned a lot in our various items with brief overviews of the program, but I've never seen such an in-depth description of what the program is, and it seems very cool. So thank you for giving us a more in-depth explanation of what y'all do. I did not see whose card went up first. Does anyone know? It's okay. Member Bars?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fraser, your passion for this is pretty evident. Thank you. Okay. So first, I just want to make sure I understand the OBAG funding opportunity before I have posing my question and my comment for the Safe Routes to School program. So I think I've got this. So OBAG is a grant program managed by MTC, and the funds go to the county CMAs for at a predetermined amount. The 120% of something means we get more because we're better, which I like. So there, I didn't quite get that, but I think I got the gist. And then off the top of the allocated amount, the TA is recommending two things be funded: CMA planning and the Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure program. And then for the rest of it, you're going to do a competitive process. Yes? Did I get that?
Yes, all
Okay.
of that is correct.
Okay. Oh, not all.
It's still an A for sure. The only thing is the 120% target. MTC is precluded from giving us a share. So we submit 120%, we're going to get less than 120. We're hoping we get more than 100.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So it's like we could get up to 120, but we have to send them the list of things that add up to 120. Okay, thank you. Okay, woohoo! Turn my mic off. I was too excited. Okay, I got the first part. Thank you. Okay, and the CMA planning, is this like we're basically paying for the model, like we're keeping that stuff going, like SF Champ?
The CMA planning funds are used for a variety of long-range planning efforts, such as the San Francisco Transportation Plan, waterfront planning, follow-on studies to the San Francisco Transportation Plan, and other efforts. And they are identified in our annual budget process.
That's the model.
Okay, cool. I got that bit. All right. So now my comment, so Mr. Fraser and Mr. Knox-White, I just want to say for the record, I am a slow street steward. I saw a picture of my slow street in your presentation. I thought that was cool. It's not my block, but the one next to mine. I love kids walking and rolling and riding to school. But I talked about this with some of my fellow constituents, and I got some feedback that I could not glean from the presentation or memo, and I'm hoping you could speak to it. So how do we know this is working? Like, you showed a lot of really fun photos and you do the weekly events, but like, how do we measure our progress in getting kids to take other means of transportation to school?
Yeah, so one of the things I didn't really talk about in the presentation is every 2 years we collect student travel tallies, and this basically is our way, or I say our MTA and the school district's way of knowing how their students travel, and we've been collecting this data for every 2 years for, I think, at least since 2013, 2015, somewhere back in there, and so we've been able to track how many students have been driving to school in single-family modes, and, you know, we saw, for example, a spike in single-family mode trips during the pandemic, and we saw in this past tallies, I believe they're done even number years, so we're due for another one this fall. We saw in the 2024 tallies that 2022 spike from the pandemic has started to come back down. Bicycling has gone up for the first time in a long time. Carpooling's gone up for the first time in a long time. So we're seeing some of that pandemic driving kind of start to come back down. So every 2 years, we work with the school district to kind of survey schools to see how students are walking, which is our traveling generally, hopefully more walking. But that's one of the ways we try to tell part of the effectiveness of this program, because we know the non-infrastructure is only one part of their kind of varied transportation decision-making with the infrastructure and the crossing guards. And so, which is one of the other reasons we're trying to improve our coordination across all those other teams to try to make the work that we do that much more effective.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful, and I wish it would have been helpful to me to see that in the memo for future reference. If you want, there is an MTA blog post, I think, for early last year where we went through the results of the past stand tallies. I'm sure I could try to find and get to you with more details if that'd be helpful. Yeah, I will read it all. I really do. I read the homework, so that would be very welcome. I think, like, here's my other, like, concern that I had. So I live on a slow street, as I mentioned, that gets a lot of speeding traffic. And I live a block away from 2 elementary schools. And there's the pickup and drop off scene on my slow street is a nightmare. And like not seeing factors like that as issues to address, or for example, like SFUSD, your kid can't walk to school until they're in 4th grade on their own. Like that's a policy. We don't really do walking school buses in reality because you can't, as a parent, leave your kid with a adult, even an adult you trust, to let them walk to school unless you jump through hoops to file paperwork. Like those kinds of things are real blockers to real families who I know. Or like the lack of bike parking. I toured an elementary school for my son who's going to be going into SFUSD, and he loves to ride his bike to school, right? He loves it. But there's no bike parking at his school right now. And there's no bike parking available at probably either of the elementary schools he's going to end up going to, at least not on site. And so, like, without seeing, I know this is a non-infrastructure program, but like without seeing acknowledgement of those kinds of hurdles as things that would be blockers, I'm really struggling. I wanna say I want to vote yes on this one, but it's just like those are my lived reality. Right, and I don't want to. I can see how a coordinator with SFUSD would be helpful, but I don't see how they're going to solve that.
Yeah, so one of the, and I can, there's a different slide and a different version of this presentation that's basically, it's a wall of text, but it's the list of everything kind of safe routes related that SFMTA does. And a lot of the things you mentioned are on that list, and a lot of the things I hear back from my school engagement leads who are on the ground are infrastructure or curb color or all of these other various related things. And so one of the things I end up doing a lot is working with those other teams to see how I can get these things adjusted for these schools. And you mentioned bike parking. Like one of the things we're actively working with APG on is one today. They have all of these bikes, all these expensive e-bikes, and there's limited bike parking off campus. They have tracks on campus. They would prefer to be only, but so we're trying to work through all of these different hoops, and we can install more racks on the street and the sidewalk because that's our right of way, and we can do that. We have racks, we can do that for free, and we're working on them for that. And we're separately working on another process to see if we can work with the school district to see if we can simplify the process for how they do that on their own. So there are some things, and we understand all of these factors in, and we hear them until when they come up, we're actively trying to work through them through all of these other avenues, all of these other infrastructure teams, traffic calming, curb color. So when they come up, we do actively work to address them. And there's another thing, there's a biweekly meeting that's like traffic engineering, safe routes, SFUSD transportation, where we actively work through these things as schools and parents and principals tell us to them. So it might not be explicitly what this program does, and I might not have, mentioned it as clearly as I could have in this presentation, but a lot of that does happen behind the scenes, and we do actively try to solve these things for schools when we hear about them.
All right, so then so then I feel like what I'm hearing you say is we do a tremendous amount of coordinating, and the coordinating that would lead to tangible results. Behind the scenes, it's not clear. I feel like we have to start to make that clearer to people, because a lot of no, I don't want to say that. Some of the feedback when I circulated this amongst the people who I talked to were like, well, what does that program even do, right? It does an event once a year. And that doesn't sound like that's true from what you're saying. I'm persuaded that that's not true. But like we have to tell the story about how you're moving the needle better. And like I could, yeah, I'd love to talk with you more about that and how to make that case. But because it really does matter. It does sound like you're doing really valuable work and your program is doing the work they need to do. But like those hurdles, like not you as a parent have to walk your child until they are in 4th grade to the school entry, like, and no obstacles and no, like, I mean, like that is a policy change that you guys could help us with, right? So anyway, I will say that. And I'm going to say one last thing for the OBAG, which is the list of the kinds of projects that we would fund with the competitive bidding process. Good stuff I like, I agree with. I would love to see evidence-backed, like, studies or like as a main criterion Because there are things we do as a city because we like them and we make them feel good. They make us feel good. And there are things we do as a city because they actually move the needle and they make lives better and they make it safer. And I really, really wish that we could add as a funding criteria that we're going to prioritize projects that that directly speak to the literature about what moves the needle, both in terms of safety and mode shift. So I don't know if that's possible to add it to the requirements for funding, but I would love it if we could.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'll say that we do ask in our application materials for applicants to submit data to back up the safety benefits if they're claiming safety benefits from their projects. Another thing that we ask for is documented diverse community support. So there are a couple of areas that we ask for, really written down. What's the data? What are people really saying? And I appreciate that request. And then I also wanted to add on the Safe Routes to School that Safe Routes to School infrastructure projects are also eligible to apply for the competitive call for projects through OPEC. Member Kim.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about Safe Route to School. There's is handle pedestrian, bicycle, transit, and also auto. To explain any example guys did about automobile, probably one of the examples is Apple, right?
So one of our 4 fun ways is carpooling. I will admit carpooling is the fun way that probably gets the least attention, in part because of the logistics of organizing carpooling is very labor intensive, so we find it a little bit more worthwhile to spend our efforts on the other 3 modes, but we do have like a carpool social toolkit and some other resources that schools can use to support that. But another car-related item that we do and have started doing more recently this past school year is we do make some circulation kind of informational flyers where schools are like, hey, parents are just kind of doing everything, but we would like them to, let's say, we want the cars to drop off on 42nd, and we want the bikes and the people walking to use 40th. So we can help them make a flyer that kind of highlights, hey, cars, you're doing a car, we want you to do this. And if you're walking or taking a bike, we want you to use this and use this campus entrance. So that's another type of flyer we started to make this year.
Suggestion. I have 3 kids, and then I did a lot of carpool. I almost done my last one is senior, so my last year is not anymore. But we using a lot of apps like Eventbrite and also Sports U. Any sports activity, practice, games. The team share, and then after that we have to share. Call, asking around anybody need a couple. But it is very simple function. Some family, everybody get those information, and then someone maybe because I need a couple, and then those app shows who need a couple, and some parents, I can pick you, you. That saves like small soccer team, 15 to 20 kids. Parents, including grandparents, is easily 30, 40 cars. So if you reduce, the 1/3, huge amount. And in the morning too, I used to couple like 2 other families, but we don't have any tool. The text message and is really hard. So, you have money, you spend 10% is really small, but still nowadays, developing software is not that pricey. So why don't you develop some app so more families use those couple, especially low income family. They have a hard time. Their neighborhood, sometimes opposite. There's no transit. Even those transit, they are not safe at night. So those kids I see, they need a more couple. I'm talking about sports games. Sports games happens everywhere. Sometimes we have to drive to other county. So, and then second, you're talking about lessons learned about SFUSD. We have 2 issues. SFUSD has several years ago they said school start time same. Maybe you hate it, right? Before each school, public school has different start time, but right now everybody's same. Means all the kids go to school at the same time. That's why the Muni cannot handle all those ridership at the same time. Maybe this is a time MTA seriously talk to USD, they starting time even 30. Right? But high school, I think that they said same, yeah, right. So before different school has different starting time, so those one give really bottleneck for the Muni. The second one is they cut the budget for the bus ride for sports game and sports games. So before, even though we don't have school bus in the morning, but they provide the bus for the sports team to attend the games, but not anymore, only championship. That means, family needed to drive them, So those kind of thing, think about it, little help. I don't know who can help, but MTA helped SFUSD, both of that's financial issue, but practically reduce car driving. And then my last suggestion is Muni ridership. I have two goals. Both of them has the same issue. After 7, they don't want to ride on the Muni because it was not safe. Especially it was passed, so even worse. And then is there any function they can report any weird stuff through the Muni mobile app or separate app? I cannot expect they call the police while in the Muni. They don't have time, and then it happens very fast. So we need to provide some tool for those teens. Normally, teen they ride Muni by themselves. Otherwise, still after 7 or after sunset, it's not still safe for the teen to ride the Muni. And this is my suggestion. Maybe last, when you're pedestrian class, please educate the kids. Do not watch cell phone while they working. It's a huge issue. And I'm doing business, so we have a lot of report young kids watching their cell phone. There are a lot of robbery happen, because they are not focusing, and then they can be target. So please educate them. Do not watch their cell phone while working. Thank you.
Member Margarita?
I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation. This is very refreshing. You're doing an amazing job. And I do see the benefit long-term of the seeds that you're planting in elementary, middle, and high school students. I wish this was around when I was a kid and when my kids were kids, because I can see the long-term benefits of time, investment, and creativity with children and youth with the SF Routes to School program. And then I wanted to just ask, so again, thank you for all your work. I personally really appreciate it. I'm on the opposite end of evidence-based studies. I'm more about proactivity and being proactive and investing in prevention and proactivity versus investing money in like the studies and all of that. But having said that, I was wondering if, and I looked through it and I could have missed it, but can you give us the different schools? Can you provide us the different schools that you mentioned that you are working with? And I appreciate the different engagement program, resources, et cetera, focused on the socioeconomic and class of each school and also traffic collisions, but I personally want to know, and I don't know if anybody else wants to know, but which schools you're actually doing the work with. I mean, I saw some of the lists with the pictures and the school names and all of that, but I want to kind of know all of them because there's some schools that I know that hopefully you are at where I volunteer, and I don't think you're there, but I could be wrong.
I don't have that list with me, but I can happily get that to staff and they can send that out to you.
I appreciate it. And if there's schools that, with the criteria that you have listed, are not on your list, how can we ensure that we get them on that list?
So just to kind of reemphasize, like you don't need to be a focus school to necessarily be eligible for our programming. So even if they're not on the list right now, we can still give them support with, you know, any of the activities that we still have capacity for. We will, given that we just refreshed the list, we will probably do it again when this next cycle comes up. But if there are criteria that, and we can send like the methodology memo that has the list so you can kind of see how it all came together. And if there are like suggestions like, I think you should weight this more, I think you should include this factor so that this rises more, we can try to integrate that so that those schools with those needs try to rise up when we run the list again.
Okay, and then I appreciate that. And then again, focused on the proactive piece of it, if we can get that list before you start the work for this next coming year so that those schools that might have not been included can be included for the next round.
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
There's no other questions or comments from members. Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Your 2 minutes.
Edward
begins.
Mason, I would strongly recommend when you're instructing the individuals on how to ride Muni, keep your feet off the seats, don't curl up and look at your device and observe the blue seats, because there's been many times where it's my seat. They don't realize that it's for the disabled or seniors. And then they're putting their feet on the seat and totally oblivious to their surroundings. And also, be respectful of the public space. Don't get on and start yelling and talking loud to everybody else and making themselves look like idiots, unfortunately. And evidently, from my observation, there must be absolutely no parental upbringing, because I was taught how to ride Muni, because, you know, I've been riding Muni for a long time. And, you know, my mother would get all dressed up. We were going to Emporium on Monday night or Thursday night to Macy's. And there was a proper way to ride Muni. So I would strongly recommend that your curriculum include that on there, because it's a disgrace as to what, I hate to say it, but the young people don't care on the surroundings that they're in. So I just leave that up to you to try to make some progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
There is no remote public comment on this item.
Great. Can I get a motion and a second to approve this item? Moved by Member Kim, seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote? Yeah, without objection, we can take this same house, same call. Okay, great. Thank you again so much for the presentation. Appreciate your time. All right, we'll move on to item 9, introduction of new business. Do any CAC members have any new business? Member Milford Rosales?
Yes, so as I think most people are aware here, we had another family get hit in a crosswalk in D6, second time in about 2.5 years this has happened, and this time
the initial MTA response was to fiddle with stoplight timing and repaint the crosswalk that was already pretty well painted, and that was it. Since then, there was a community install that Supervisor Dorsey, when in his released plan for things to do, asked for the install to either be legitimized or just replaced with as it is, but like by MTA workers in the appropriate way. And the city has ripped out the install as of today and painted a bike lane that doesn't really match the criteria for what their new bike lanes are supposed to look like. Since the Vision Zero plan has ended, the only direction that we've gotten is that the mayor has a plan and it will be followed, and we don't really know what that is. So I'd like to, I guess, take this opportunity to ask, is there any new, since Vision Zero ended, is there any new plan for what to do? We're on pace to keep having the same rate of pedestrian fatalities, and when they happen, we're seeing less action than we used to, and there's not even a plan or notion of a plan for what should be done. It's just kind of open to vibes, and then community, and in our case, supervisor response that it's not enough and that there are concrete things that should be done instead, but no direction from MTA or the mayor's office on this. So I'd like to know if MTA or the mayor's office or anyone has any actual concrete plans for how to respond to fatalities and what to do since Vision Zero ended without meaningful improvement.
Member Margarita?
Thank you, Chair. Similar to Member Rosales' statements, with D9, unfortunate accidents in all areas of D9, including Mission, Bernal Heights, the Portola. We want to get the community involved to try and come up with solutions so that we can eliminate any type of accidents. And we do want SFMTA and the mayor's office to invest, right, in D9 for the safety of pedestrians. And even the talks that we just had with the previous report of OBAG, and even Member Barr's, talking about your child riding their bike to school. It scares the life out of me. It's so scary. And we just need to do better. We need to do better, and we need to invest in the children and families of the city of San Francisco. So that's one. Second, catch my breath for both of them. Second, we're looking at getting also community engagement and also labor involved in the renaming of Cesar Chavez Street. We, especially after the recent investigation that was reported on, which has been going on for the last 5 or 6 years. And so we, again, want to work with community and D9 and also with labor to see how we can move forward in renaming it. So I just wanted to make you all aware that we're going to come up with a plan, but we don't want it to be from someone outside of D9. It's important to have it renamed by the residents of D9 and also labor. Thank you.
Member Bars, was it Member Kim? Member Kim.
Thank you, Chair. I want to bring the MTA up regarding the fair debater prevention program. I saw the part. They made a huge success after they installed the new gate, and not only the preventing fare evader, they have like maintenance costs reduced huge because normally someone who avoid paying a ticket, they're the one vandalize and cause the problem and safety issue too. So Muni has a little different situation. Muni, San Francisco choose all boarding policy. It's really hard to prevent, fare evading. This time we have to think about, is there any other way? And then how can we prevent it? It's really related to safety issue still happening. And whenever downtown there's a huge police activity happen, and then maybe clean up downtown, and then it kind of skis ball on the other side. Like District 1, we have 38, and all those people get on the 38, come to our neighborhood, going around, and then get on the 38 back to original space. So it's an ongoing problem. So maybe we can discuss how can we prevent, fare evader on the Muni. Thank you.
Member Bars?
Yeah, so I would like to ask that the Safe Routes to School folks come back for an information item. I feel like blanking on the center's name. Oh my, Fraser, Mr. Fraser. Mr. Fraser mentioned that soon there would be an update to the travel survey data, and that they would have a better sense of the modes used at different schools. And I'm also very interested in the question that Member Margarita asked about what schools. So I would, this isn't an urgent item, but I would like them to come back for an informational item if they would, and just explain those metrics. And I also would just like to plus one, frankly, what my colleagues have said. I mean, the traffic safety is appalling. So thank you.
Any public comment on new business in the room? Operator, is there any remote public comment on new business?
There is no remote public comment on new business.
Great, then we'll move on to public comment. This is general public comment on items under the Transportation Authority CAPC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. It looks like we have public comment in the room.
Your 2 minutes begins now.
Yes, thank you very much, Edward Mason. This is from San Jose in the metro down there, and it there's an article in here about the big convention they had last week. And I reflected back in October when we had a presentation on the off-hour delivery and bike delivery downtown and those items. But those are non-technical things. But here's what's coming down the road is Uber Eats and also little automated on their own delivery system. So we need to be keeping up with our programs with what technology is doing and how they're advancing along the way, and just not take a stationary view of, well, we're going to have a logistics hub and we're going to have people riding around downtown on bicycles delivering stuff when technology is here, and it's we should be focusing on technology. So, and also, if we're going to have delivery downtown, you can have yellow zones, which are being implemented, reserving that by the internet. So a delivery truck comes up, they don't have to circle around looking for someplace. They know they have a location that they can then, they know it's there, and make their delivery, and the next truck that's scheduled comes in. So I think we just need to take one step further and consider technology in some of the things that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Operator, is there any remote public comment?
Yes, we have one remote public comment. Roland, go ahead. Your time begins now. Are you there, Roland? Which I think you disappeared. Okay. Oh.
It works a lot better when I get the unmute. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'd like to touch on two bills. It's Senate Bill 79, which is a Wiener bill, and Senate Bill 707. Senate Bill 79, as you've probably heard, basically supersedes the city's zoning around transit. And unfortunately, it has unintended consequences. As an example, entire mobile parks could be wiped out. The people who live there would be displaced, and the entire mobile home park would be replaced with apartments. Another example we found out in our case is schools. We could lose entire schools, including the playgrounds that we use, as parks in the evening. And once again, they'll be converted into apartments in middle of our blocks. So this morning at MTC out there, Senator Wiener was supposed to be introducing a cleanup bill to take care of these issues. However, he's changed his mind. So I've asked MTC this morning to introduce emergency legislation to take care of this before Senate Bill 79 becomes law on July 1st. On Senate Bill 707 is a complete change to Brown Act rules. It mandates remote public participation, basically wants every meeting to be just like the meeting that you are holding tonight. But unfortunately, the Board of Supervisors are not complying at the TA. They haven't, and actually, as far as I can tell, they've been breaking the law since January the 1st. So I think Supervisor Melgar needs to be aware of this bill, remedy the situation, and there are provisions in that bill to handle even individuals who were causing the kind of disruptions last year that caused remote public participation to be withdrawn from the general public. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. And there are there's no further remote public comment.
Great, thank you, operator. And that puts us on item 11, which is adjournment. Thank you all. This meeting is now adjourned.